facts. Bravely we prove in our striving, trudging together each day. Where there's a will, there's a way.
I was a little worried. Well, hi. Hi, Ingrid. Good to see you. Are you not driving? It's probably going to be you, me, and Amber, which perfectly fine with me. Amber helped me pick this out. I'm like, can you help me with some topics? And she said, grief and recovery. I'm like, woo, that's a good topic. Too big for that's a podcast right there. So, all right. And yes, I intentionally, I don't like it when it starts at 4:20 because I think people will, I don't want it to be, off. Yay. Got a notification. Wow, that's surprising. Facebook has not been very nice lately. And I am going to be reading out of Language of the Heart. If you have it, it'll be on 236. 236. I am going to read from the big book first. Amber says she's not coming because I didn't choose her topic. Fine, I'm not going to let you know I'm live anymore. She's probably already here. Oh, there she is. Surprise, surprise. We're about to hit the 3-minute mark, too. So let's go ahead and do introductions and get started. So, actually, before I get started, I went to the doctor today. And, I have stomach issues. And I'm overweight, but I don't eat. It's because it's, I don't want to say. It's just called bloating. Let's call it that. I went and stepped on the scale, 210 pounds. I've been 180, a buck 85 forever. 200 pounds. No wonder I can't do half this shit I need to do. Yeah. It's not fat, so. But we're getting it taken care of. That just that worried me. But then they took my blood pressure, and it was 122/61. I'm like, booyah, that's right. For years, it was in the 160, 170 range. I've worked really hard. I've had to work very, very hard on my blood pressure. Okay. And anger was one of the things that I had to work with. And emotional sobriety definitely had an effect on all of that, now that I think of it. I'm just going to read out of 164 real quick. Just one paragraph. Our book is meant to be suggestive only. We realize we know only a little. God will constantly disclose more to you and to us. Ask him in your morning meditation what you can do each day for the man who is still sick. The answers will come. If your own house is in order. Okay. I was talking to a sponsee yesterday, and he was kind of asking the question, well, when does God, is like, he was thinking that God was going to be talking directly to him. And I'm like, no, that's not how it works. God talks through his people, through his children. That's why you must go to meetings. You must ask, and then you have to put some action into it. And that made a lot more sense to him. And I told him, but what God's going to do is he's going to use you to reach his children also. So listen to everybody, even if you do not like them. Go ahead and listen and see if you can get something out of it, right? Easy stuff. Yeah. I'm sorry. At least we're kind of going through it together, huh? It's a little different. Mine's gallbladder, but at the same time, it still sucks. Um, I am glad that you've gotten better, though. I was scared. Weeks, I was scared. Okay. The answers will come if your own house is in order. But obviously, you cannot transmit something you haven't got. Let's keep that in mind. Let's keep that in mind while we're doing emotional sobriety. Okay? Because emotional sobriety, again, is about clearing away the things that that stand between you and the sunlight of the spirit. So, and a lot of times, a lot of people don't even want to look at their emotional sobriety. And especially men, because of that, we tend to think that if we work on those things that we're weak, or if we have to go to therapy that we're weak, or dependence upon something else. But the thing is, we do have dependence, and it's an emotional dependence which needs to be got rid of. All right, let's get to it. This is a little bit longer, but I don't read the whole thing. It's worth reading the whole thing, but I think that many ulcers who have put our AA's booze cure to severe but successful tests still find they often lack emotional sobriety. Perhaps they will be the spearhead for the next major development in AA, the development of much more real maturity and balance, which is to say, humility, in our relations with ourselves, with our fellows, and with God. Those adolescent urges so many of us had for top approval, perfect security, and perfect romances, urges quite appropriate to the age of 17, proved to be an impossible way of life when we are at the age of 47 or 57. So what happens to us is I started drinking when I was 13. That means that I was emotionally stunted at that point. That's what I would be. I would be 13 until I made some changes. Okay. Now that works when you're 13, but when you get older, throwing yourself on the floor to get what you want and screaming and crying doesn't work as well. In fact, people don't like it because it makes them feel like they're walking on eggshells. That makes them nervous, man. Talking about somebody's life. They don't want to be around that. Would you want to be around it? Actually, we're around it all the time. So now that we know that we were stunted, okay, the alcohol stunts you in that. Okay, that gives us a place from which to start. Okay. Since AA began, I have taken immense wallops in all of these areas because of my failure to grow up. That's what this is about. Emotionally and spiritually. My God, how painful it is to keep demanding the impossible. And how very painful to discover finally that all along we have had the cart before the horse. Then the final agony of seeing how awfully wrong we have been, we still find ourselves unable to get off the emotional merry-go-round. You may see a lot of old timers who just aren't happy. Okay. You'll see some people that get upset very quick at little things. Okay. It is because they are dependent on other people to do those things, and that person failed because they're human, right? All right, go shut the door here. Our worker, and I think he's done. Yay! I can move back into my office. It looks pretty nice too. Unable to get off the merry-go-round. How to translate right mental conviction and right emotional results, and so into easy, happy, and good living. Well, that's not only the neurotics problem, it's the problem of life itself for all of us who have got to the point of real willingness to hew the right principles in all of our affairs. I got caught in that. I got caught in it. Okay, my PTSD is what it turned out to be. But I had these anger issues, right? And people were like, Dion, that's a resentment. It's a resentment. You got to work on that resentment. It's a resentment. So I stopped telling people because it wasn't a resentment. I had worked through that. And that's what he's talking about there. Okay. I had done the work, but I was not relieved of a lot of things. I had more work to do. Okay. And because of my PTSD, it would hold me back. But I had to become aware of that. And then I had to start learning a lot of things. Number one, like what caused it, things like that. Okay. So you're trying, and you can't, but you just can't get the real willingness to hew away the right things, like the anger. Okay. So what did we just read? You can't transmit something that you haven't got. But before that, it says, God will show more to you and others. Okay. That means therapy. That means talk to your physicians, talk to a therapist. I needed a therapist in this case. I utilized EMDR and it worked fantastic for me. Worked fantastic. Hello! Not sure who you are yet, but I'm sure I'll know soon. Even then, as we hew away, peace and joy may still elude us. That used to fucking piss me off. Day after day, I'd work on this stuff, and every time I turned around, there was an intrusive thought that made me shake and sweat. That's what would happen to me. I'd start shaking and sweating. And it felt just like, it was the only way I could describe it, is it's just like detoxing off alcohol. That's how it feels, that bad. And I happen to know how that feels. And it eludes us. That's the place so many of us ulcers have come to. And it's a hell of a spot, literally. How shall our unconscious, right? Our unconscious, the part that we don't utilize, your unconscious is always working, but it usually works mostly while you're asleep, right? That's when your unconscious works through things. We were just talking about drinking dreams. That's kind of part of that, and that also, right? And it's how we'll bring our unconscious, from which so many of our fears, our compulsions, and phony aspirations still stream. See, sometimes we think you got it, but we've been fooled. That has happened to me several times on my journey through mental health. And it was a journey, and a journey just like AA that I have to do every single day. How can these things be brought into line with what we actually know, what we actually believe, know, and want? How to convince our dumb, raging, and hidden Mr. Hyde becomes our main task. In this case, for Bill, Mr. Hyde would be the depression. Nope. Nah, man. Okay, in my case, it was depression too, but it was also PTSD. But he found an answer here. Right? And he was going to therapy. He's done, and he, even before all this happened, he tried mushrooms, he tried acid, but all under doctor's care. Remember, it wasn't drugs yet. So I've recently come to believe that this can be achieved, and it's true, it can be. I believe so because I begin to see many benighted ones, folks like you and me, commencing to get real results. Last autumn, depression, having no really rational cause at all, almost took me to the cleaners. I began to be scared that I was in for another long chronic spell. Considering the grief I've had with depression, it wasn't a bright prospect. I kept asking myself, why can't the 12 steps work to release depression? By the hour, I stared at the St. Francis prayer. It's better to comfort than to be comforted. Here was the formula, all right, but why didn't it work? That was my problem. I kept doing this and doing it, and it didn't work, but it worked for them. Okay? But I was missing something. There was something that I hadn't caught yet. That's coming up. Suddenly, I realized what the matter was. My basic flaw had always been dependence. Absolute, almost absolute dependence. If you go read Bill's story, his wife is very codependent. He was highly dependent on her. And because of that dependency, mental illness popped up. Okay. So absolute dependence on people or circumstances to supply me with prestige, security, and the like. Failing to get these according to my perfectionist dreams and specifications, I'd fought for them, and when defeat came, so did my depression. There wasn't a chance of making the outgoing love of St. Francis a workable and joyous way of life until these fatal and almost absolute dependencies were cut away. So, emotional sobriety comes down to taking responsibility for your own emotions. We cannot rely on other people to make us happy or to say, oh, you're such a great guy. No, that comes from within, man. That's an inside job. Aside from the fact that only God can determine your worth, the rest of us would fall short in describing, somebody else's worth. Okay? I think I'm a pretty decent guy. I've worked through a lot of things. I'm a man with a real answer. I've been through this stuff. Okay? So, just like in the third step, we had to stop fighting first. In order for emotional dependent or emotional sobriety to start to take effect, we must cut off those faulty dependencies. Okay? Am I still dependent on my wife? Yes, to a certain extent, I still am. But not for any of those things. Nope. Okay? I'll clean the kitchen and I don't hear anything. You don't do things like that expecting to hear something. Men, just because you did the dishes and did what you were supposed to doesn't require a thank you. But for us, oh gosh, you must thank us. I've spent my hard time cleaning my own stuff up. Okay? And it turns into self-esteem. Self-esteem. Yeah, it is one of the promises. And it's more along the lines of your anger is going to be removed. It's not going to be removed, but when you get through it and you get more serenity, it's just a lot nicer to be on the serenity side even while I'm arguing. So number one, I had to cut off these dependencies. I had to learn that when somebody triggered me or made me angry, that I had to deal with it. Okay? People are not going out of their way to undercut Dion. Not in that sense. Okay? So now when I look in the mirror, I can love me for who I am. Self-esteem goes up. I can love me for who I am because I'm not relying on these other people. And then something absolutely fucking amazing is going to happen. You do that, something's going to happen. Yeah. It's going to take a second then to get, it's a paragraph. So. Because I had over the years undergone a little bit of spiritual development. We're talking about Bill W. Of course he did, right? The absolute quality of these frightful dependencies had never been so starkly revealed. Reinforced by what grace I could secure in prayer, I found I had to exert every ounce of will and action. What? Yes, you're going to use your willpower. You have it. You have some. You do. You have a lot more willpower than you know. Just not for alcohol. Just not for your drug of choice, okay? But you can put your willpower towards cutting. You know what? Why can't I go pick up my own fucking ice? Okay? It's things like I stopped using my wife as where I complain. That was one big one. Oh, I got a therapist for that. And that's where I keep it. So if you think of things, my friend Lori taught me this, and it's great if you can catch it. Think of everything as an arena. Create the right arena and act appropriately in that arena. That's emotional sobriety. But it gets better than that. Reinforce, I have found I had to exert every ounce of will and action to cut off these faulty dependencies upon people, upon AA, indeed, upon any circumstance whatsoever. Here it is. Then only could I be free to love as Francis had. And I love this line. Emotional and instinctual satisfactions I saw were really the extra dividends of having love, offering love, and expressing a love appropriate to each relation in life. There's our answer. What's the answer? Love. You have to learn to love yourself. Learn to love yourself. I hate it. You got to learn to love yourself. Shut up. I love me. I don't want to admit, you know. And then it gets better. See, when you release those things, you have more to give. And it's usually in the form of love. And then you get to love appropriate to each relationship. Appropriate. Keyword. I'm going to go a little bit more in here. In the first 6 months of my own sobriety, I worked hard with many alcoholics. Not a one responded. This was Bill in his first 6 months. Great or small, I worked hard with many, not one responded. Yet this work kept me sober. It wasn't a question of those alcoholics giving me anything. My stability came out of trying to give, not out of demanding that I receive. The reason he stayed sober, it doesn't matter if somebody else stays sober. That wasn't what it was doing. It was keeping him sober. His offering of love was keeping him sober. Thus, I think it can work out with emotional sobriety. If we examine every disturbance we have, great or small, we'll find at the root of it some unhealthy dependency and its consequent unhealthy demand. Let us, with God's help, continuously surrender these hobbling demands. Then we can be set free to live and love. We may then be able to 12-step ourselves and others into emotional sobriety. There's more. Think of it this way. In every aspect that we have, there's mental, there's physical, there's emotional, and there's spiritual. So you got to think of those four things. They're always going to be attached to things like this. Okay? So, and then there's one more paragraph. Once, of course, I haven't offered you a really new idea, only a gimmick that has started to unhook several of my own hexes at death. Nowadays, my brain no longer races compulsively in either elation, grandiosity, or depression. I have been given a quiet place in the bright sunshine. And that is where I'm almost to. See, I used to be that way, but my brain no longer races around. I'm neither I'm neither really elated all the time. I don't get grandiose, right? And that has to do with humility. But the humility is really easy to bring into that, considering you're not expecting anything in return. Hmm. So, cut off those faulty dependencies. Quit relying on others on how you feel. Okay? People cannot make you mad. You allow them. I'm the same way. I don't even like. I don't even say it. So, thank you, Ingrid. You too. I love you. I'm wrapping up. So, she already knew. Ingrid always knows when I'm wrapping up. So, actually, that's usually my Q2 wrap up. Right? So, thank you everybody for being here. Go out and instead of relying on other people to give you things, just go out and give love. Just go out and give love. Watch what happens. Watch what happens. Love you guys. Peace out and have a day. Bye bye.